So hello and welcome back to the fourth of our Kenniscentrum seminars. This time we welcome here Professor Ellyvan Klauw, who is from the University of Groningen in the north of the Netherlands. And she's going to be talking to us about a very important topic, which is the way societies and places change when there is a demographic change. And she's going to talk about how the demographic change is just one of the many changes affecting depopulated areas. So it's over to you, Ellie, and you have around 45 minutes to present your talk. If people would like to ask questions, they can write them in the chat, or they can send them to Antonio Pascucci, or they can put them in the Facebook. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth, and thank you, audience, for inviting us to this webinar of the Kinesis Consortium. And well, I will talk a bit about demographic change in the Netherlands, in Europe, and also recent changes in that demographic transition, and what kind of effects this has on the region. And that region in this case is the northern region of the Netherlands. At the last minute, I would have done this presentation with Elles Bulder, who's a lecturer at the Hanzehogeschool University of Applied Sciences. But at the last minute, she was unable to come. So I hope that I will unfold her research and mine in a proper way. So I'll start the presentation now. And I will introduce ourselves a bit more. Let's see. Yeah, demographic transition, urbanization, and population development in the Netherlands. We will go in a bit on how this transition is taking shape in the Netherlands and in Europe. And then we will focus on the Northern Netherlands and also about policy and effects in the Northern Netherlands. And maybe you see similar developments in your region, or you have questions afterwards, and I'm happy to answer them. I'll first introduce us a bit further. Well, Elles Bulder is a professor living environment in transition, and demographic change is one of the transitions at the research center NoorderRuimte. That means Northern Space of the Hanzehogeschool University of Applied Sciences in Groningen, which is a university place because next to the Hanzehogeschool University of Applied Sciences, we also have a university, and where I work as well in the Department of Spatial Sciences. And I'm the coordinator of the knowledge.
I'm so sorry, Ellie.
Yes?
We can't see the PowerPoint.
You can't see the PowerPoint?
No.
Oh, sorry, then I go back.
Okay, and, thank you.
Let's see. Then that was not working. Do you see
it? Yes.
Now you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that okay, Antonio, do you think?
Yes, it is okay.
Okay. So I was telling you already about our title, and I was presenting us. You see this?
Yes.
Okay, fine. So I'm coordinating a knowledge platform on population decline, also in the Northern Netherlands. And I'll start now with demographic transition. Because of rising standards of living and the availability of contraceptives and more emphasis on individual development, families in the Western world would choose to have lesser children. You see that on the first image, 1 child, 2 children. And people have higher life expectancies because of health conditions were getting better and better. You see that on the second image, and due to that, we have more and more elderly people over 65 and also over 80 years of age and we make differences in those age groups. But there's also another change, and that is in the household forms. People tend to live in much smaller households than they used to do. And reasons for this are more people who are divorcing and living alone or alone with their children, more elderly people who stay in their homes and don't remarry again after one of them has died. And also youngsters start a households formerly were households with two people who started a household, and now we see more and more single person youngsters who start a household. And this has serious consequences, and we call this the second demographic transition. The first one was being the transition brought about by the Industrial Revolution. And after a short rise of the birth rate, both the birth and death rates dropped dramatically. And we are now in this second demographic transition. And here you see also the households, the percentages. So the traditional family with children is less, is only a small group now. And in the above that, you see an image of a population pyramid. Maybe you are, you know this pyramid. We see in the green line, we see how this was formerly, and the blue is how at the moment the population pyramid is. On the left hand, you see the men age groups. So starting below at 0 to 10, those are the children, and getting up till 100 years old. And on the right hand, you see the women age group. It's more or less the same, but not quite. In some age groups, there are more women than men, and vice versa. The light green lines shows the age structure in the 1900s, and then it was really a pyramid. Whereas for now, in 100 years, this has evolved and changed. And you see now much more of, sometimes you call it a Barbapapa figure or a mushroom. But you see the age groups over 40 and 50 are much bigger than the younger age groups, and of course the older age groups. And this bulb, we call it, these are the baby boom generation, the generation who was born after the Second World War, in the first 10, 15 years after the Second World War. And these baby boomers are slowly moving up the pyramid. And eventually they will, of course, vanish from this pyramid. But in the coming years, we have a very big group of people. In 20 years, a very big group of 70 plus we will have in the Netherlands. And this is also the case for more countries in Europe. In the next image, you see causes of this. For example, the fertility rate in Europe is changing also. You see how paler the color, the lesser babies are born. Oh, stop, this is already aging. I wanted to go back to the fertility rate. So we have a fertility rate in Germany, for example, in 2015 of 1.3 children per, yes, and this has to stop. And this is not enough to replace the population. To replace the population, you need to, it is going to this, I can't stop this, but so you see in the Netherlands, also the fertility rate is going down. And in the other image, you see the aging of the population in Europe. And it's also going quite fast. So let's stop here for a moment, because the fertility rate is low and our population would go down if it was not for immigration. And we have a lot of immigration in the Netherlands, and that's why our population is still growing, but not for natural growth. And the challenge of the aging is another challenge: less children, more elderly people. How is this worldwide? Worldwide, we see same tendencies. One of them is also not only fertility and aging, but regional movements. And there, the most important movement is, of course, urbanization. And let's see how this goes further. Yep. Yeah. So urbanization worldwide is a worldwide phenomenon. And 1.5 million people are added every week to the global urban population. And this is also the case for the whole of Western Europe, Western countries, but also countries in the north of Africa, in Russia, in South America, etc. And this leads to population decline in some areas of Europe more than in other regions. You see also that the red group, why is it go so fast? Stop. Yeah, you see that the orange and more orange areas are regions who are still growing, and the blue areas have more population decline. And this is different per country. If you look in the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, you see quite a lot of differences in a country. On the whole of Europe, you see that in Eastern Europe, especially areas have severe population decline. And the Netherlands, very small on this map, we have also regions with population growth and regions with population decline. And I'll show you now how this is, more as Great Britain is, since Brexit here, not included, but also there the big cities are growing, and other rural areas as Scotland and etc. and Northern Ireland, there the population is declining. Sorry, people, I don't know why it goes back and forth all the time, but yes. It goes quickly like this. The projected population growth in the Netherlands, the prognosis, it's always difficult prognosis. We need them because we have to see trends, but the prognosis now for the regions in the Netherlands is that Groningen, that's in the north, and Zeeland, which is in the south, and stop it here for a moment, that those are the regions with a population decline. I wanted to show you this picture. Yes. Okay. And Zeeland and Groningen are two regions included in the Kenniscentrum program. And we think that they will diminish, and these are the shrinking and anticipation areas in the Netherlands. Oh, shoot. Go back. Stop here. Because I want to tell you a bit more of this on this image. We have regions here, especially the west of the Netherlands, where the big cities are, Amsterdam, The Hague, Rotterdam, Utrecht, who are still growing, and the more rural areas, and especially the region at the borders, where population decline is. These are the prognosis for the coming years. And I will tell you a bit more on the prognosis and the actual situation at the moment later on. But those two regions, Northern Netherlands and Southern Netherlands, Southwest Netherlands, are included in the Kinesis program. Now I'll show you next. Yeah, so in 2010 or 2009, more or less, in the Netherlands, we noticed that there were areas with serious population decline. And I myself can remember I was at a meeting and the Dutch Minister of Housing came back from the south of the Netherlands and he said, oh, I'm shocked what have I seen there. There are empty houses, there are schools closing. It looks like a sort of deserted area. And this is something which will happen in more municipalities in the Netherlands, and we have to do something about it. It's also our problem in the west of the Netherlands. And that was also the moment I thought, hey, I have to look in this, what is happening here. So in 2010, this led to the launching of a national action plan on population decline and the definition of shrinking areas, krimp regio's, and anticipation areas. The red ones are the shrinking areas. So you see in the north of the Netherlands, Oost-Groningen, and north of or East Frisia, and anticipation areas that are regions where the national policy said you have to anticipate on population decline, household decline. And that definition is, of course, discussed. Population decline and household decline are not the same. Mostly household decline comes a bit later on after population decline, which makes it very difficult sometimes in discussions with people to say, okay, your population is declining, but they say, a municipality say, we still need houses, and that can be the case. Only in 10 or 15 years, maybe you don't need that houses which you are building now. And I, in my network, are confronted very often with this question. So the policy makers also said we have to make a regional program on this, but we won't fight the shrinking because we don't think that is a good idea. We want to accommodate the shrinking of the population or the change in the population, because very quickly it was said that, okay, you can build and attract people in your village or in your municipality, but that will be in competition with your neighbor municipality or your neighbor village. And then it becomes a struggle for the last newcomers, the last inhabitants, and it's much more wise to see how together in a region you can take care of services and care, etc. And now, also in 2010, the network population decline started. Yep. Yeah, this network. And it was funded by the 2 universities of Groningen and 3 provinces, regional bodies, in order to share knowledge, developing and connecting academic and practice-based knowledge, policy and best practices concerning population decline, the maintenance of services, etc. In this network, for example, we tell experience on how to combine different schools and services like libraries, etc. We disseminate this experience and also discuss what are the best options. One of the research areas has also been dealing with ratio and emotion, because a situation of population decline and loss of services is all very often seen as a loss, and you have to reframe it and maybe go from more to better services. And this is a difficult discussion, but losing a school for a village doesn't say that this village becomes unlivable. If there is no shop, it doesn't pose real trouble to many people. People have cars, they go to other villages. It's only for a very limited amount of people that it causes problem. We did this research and we disseminated this because in the opinion and the image of people, they only see the losses and they think life is becoming then miserable. But rationally, it can be, your life can be at the same level. It's only, it has to be replaced by social networks or citizens initiatives. And the worst thing to do is to have your closed supermarket with wooden windows stay in the villages, because then every time you are remembered, this supermarket is closed. Whereas in day-to-day life, you just go to the next village where you go to school, where you have to go to your general practitioner, etc. So this is what we do. And we organized a lot of meetings, which we call Krimp Café. Krimp means shrinkage. Café means informal network. And the professor and the villager can meet the people who work at housing companies or people who work at municipalities, can see how in other regions things are done. And this works quite well. At least before Corona, this worked quite well. And also we try now to have research from over the borders, like here in Kenniscentrum, and to compare this to our own initiatives. The network started in 2010, and then the policy was most on creating and promoting awareness on demographic change, building this network and connecting research. In the period after 2015, we saw that it was not alone a problem of demographic change, but we saw all kinds of other transitions, which Prof in the introduction mentioned. There was also scaling up. So the last supermarket was not only closed because there were less people in the village, or a bit less people in the village or in a town, but because those consumers have other habits. They order online. You have bigger and bigger supermarkets. Same for education, to have all possible options in a school. They were enlarged and concentrated in areas. Same with care. You have regional hospitals, but if you want a high standard of quality, you have to concentrate services. So sometimes it's due to demographic change. Sometimes it's due to other transitions. Also national policy. And so since 2015, we connected demographic transition to other transitions, and energy transition came with it. Care policy, the idea that elder people should stay longer in their own houses instead of in elderly homes. That had a lot of effects in sparsely populated areas. So we also took that in account in our network. Yes. However, all these transitions, you must see this for the Netherlands as in a country, a small country with short distances. And we will show you some images which maybe are for your country different. In the Netherlands, we sometimes think services are at are far away, but if you compare it in kilometers or in miles to other countries, everything is quite close. But also here you have ratio and you have emotion, which are sometimes different. Yes, so for example, the mean for a primary school is open 7 kilometers. Formerly it was thought you have to walk to a school. Secondary school mean is 2.3, but in some regions, of course, the more oranges is further away. This is also the case for a general practitioner. They are quite close, but in sparsely populated areas, they are further away. Hospital, of course, there you can see in the last years, many hospitals were concentrated. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we have to see this one to the hospital. Yeah, so you see in this deep orange, which is almost all the north of the Netherlands, there is, hospitals are further away, more than 6 kilometers, and in this, of course, is felt by people. The last year, some slight changes came. This started just before Corona in 2018. There was more interest in living in the country. And since Corona, this tendency to leave the cities has become more intense. And this resulted in migration out of urban areas in favor of rural areas. But we can't really see if this is a trend and what are the real causes, because we also have a housing crisis in our big cities. In Amsterdam, it's very difficult to get a house. It's very expensive. And for families in Corona time, there was this idea that in the country, of course, you have maybe a garden and at least a spare room for putting your desk and do your online work. So we don't know exactly which cause is the most important, but we see this trend to internal migration out of the cities, first to the areas around the cities, but now also to other parts of the Netherlands. And this January, we did a webinar together with the Cadastre. And the Cadastre is the organization who keeps a register from people who buy houses, where they come from, how old they are, what kind of houses they buy, and to which regions they go. And I think it's interesting to conclude with 2 images where you can see that between 2013 and 2019, there have been some changes in this. So these are incoming residents, buyers. North of the Netherlands are the 3 provinces. And you see in those 6 years, there are more people buying houses from outside the region. And that's in percentage that is developing. That is 3 times as much in those 6 years. But in absolute numbers, it's not very big group. It's 1,400 buyers, so households. So in 2013, and in 2019, it's 4,000. So it's not big, but for an area who's sparsely populated, it's visible. You can see who those buyers are. And I show you also where they come from. That is here. They come from, of course, border regions, provinces or regions very near to the north, but they also come from the west of the Netherlands. And this is also 2013 and 2019. People from Amsterdam, but also from areas around Amsterdam, for example, buy houses now in northern Netherlands. And this is a very, this group, we also did research on who are those buyers. And we see two big groups. We see one group who has roots in the northern Netherlands. One of the parents came from there, was born there, or spent all the ways their holidays there. That's also possible. But that one group, we call them return migration after 10, 50 years maybe. And they have also a cultural connection with the north of the Netherlands. And the other group are more elderly people, 55 plus, sometimes still at work, but thinking already about where they want to live when they are out of work. And they can work with the new possibilities of digital working and the more network we have now in the north. Those people sell their houses at a good price because prices are scarce in Amsterdam and The Hague, and they buy a nicer house, a bigger house in the north of the Netherlands. And as such, there is a discussion: are they contributors to the northern Netherlands or not? Because they are already elder, they have some money, can be good. But also they buy the nicest houses in villages where local people wanted to buy those houses as well. So we keep a close eye on these developments, and it needs a lot more research, also comparison with other European countries. And for example, in June, we have a population conference here in the a European Population Conference in Groningen, and where scientists of several countries will also make a resume of their post-corona movements, internal movements, so that we can see if this is a trend or just a hiccup, and what does this mean to our rural regions. Well, as for now, this is the most important things I wanted to share with you, and I'm open for discussion and questioning. I will stop my presentation here and share the screen for the discussion. Thank you for your attention, also on behalf of Elles Bulder.
Thank you very much for that, Ellie. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we have some questions. At this moment, I can't see any questions in the chat, but maybe we need to give people a couple of moments to think about their questions. And if Antonio has any questions, he can also tell us. I myself have a question, because there's a whole dilemma in the Netherlands and in many other countries, which is that the cost of rural housing, as you say, tends to go up because of people returning there. The people returning there are very good news because they bring an income, they make a little bit of scope for business, economic activity, and so on. But then they tend to push up the price of the properties so that local people who have lower incomes can't afford to live in those rural areas. Is there any provision for this in the Netherlands? Do you give any special help to people trying to buy property in the villages where they live?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, and it's due to a lot of discussion. We had local elections in March. And many many political parties said we should build more, so then they have more houses. Otherwise, but secondly, they said we should build for our local people, local people first, and this also is a problem with populist parties. Already they think that the rural areas are left behind by the national policy, and in a region the border areas are left behind more. So there's already this tendency, and we have seen that also, that national policy has neglected these regions, and now this housing. So you see a lot of sentiment. What are these newcomers coming to do? And buy houses, and we should put a fence around our village and first house our own youngsters. Especially youngsters are well, let's say, are a question. It's not always a problem, because we did some research also. Youngsters in the last decades, incomes rise. So many young people think that their first house should be already a complete house with a garden and etc. Whereas, well, maybe we people of my age started in the 80s and the 90s, and we were already happy with a small house or an apartment or something. But if you live in a rural area, you want a rural house with a garden. So that is one problem. And then so there are not always the houses don't fit the question.
No.
And also for the elderly people, so there's a policy that they should stay in their homes, but those are big homes, farms, or big houses, and they should go maybe to a smaller apartment. And 20 years ago they would go to an elderly home. We had good elderly homes in the Netherlands, and that would make room for younger people. But now they stay in their houses. They have paid off their houses, so why should they go to an expensive apartment?
Yeah,
but we have provisions for housing. So in the new programs, in new building programs, some of these houses are destined for special groups, young people, starters.
Right. So that's one way it can be done.
Yeah.
Here in Spain, we have a further twist to this problem. In fact, two further twists to the problem, because many people, as you know, left the villages in Spain, especially the more remote villages or the small towns, but they didn't sell their houses. And so the houses belong to people, they're private property, and yet they're falling to pieces. Okay. And no one can oblige them to maintain those houses. The price of rural property in those areas is very low, but also there's nothing for sale. So even if young people want to buy the houses, they usually can't, because they're not for sale. Yet the owners are not obliged to maintain them, because it's private property. You do what you like with your private property. The further twist of that is that in some places, the situation has become so bad that these houses are almost in a ruinous state. And so people then want to get rid of them because of possible liability. And then they get sold at a very low price, mainly to people coming in from Africa. Okay. They're not actually habitable in technical terms. They don't have a certificate saying that they're habitable, but there are people living in them. And so we're creating kind of ghettos of poverty in certain rural areas. In other rural areas, ironically, people can't find houses to buy, and there are a lot of empty houses. It's very complex. I think we have a different twist on it from the Netherlands. Maybe our situation is closer to Italy in that sense.
Yeah, I don't recognize the same scale. Those left behind houses, but and that's only 10 years ago, 5, 6 to 10 years ago, when I started my work here in the Northern Netherlands. There were villages where there were really empty houses where you saw weed growing,
like here,
etc. There's a small place called Holwert that's at the Wadden Sea, and it was very depressed village. But then some villagers started with, we want to bring back Holwert At sea again, we want to make a connection with the sea, and they started all kind of things. And it was a very active village, and now there is no house for sale. So in 6 years, this changed dramatically. This was
that would be very interesting to know if you can send us maybe the description of that project, because that would be precisely the kind of thing that we need to look at here, I think.
And we try to fix, to see in research why certain villages become thriving again and others don't.
Yeah, that's what we want to know. We want to know the answer to that question, right?
We don't have the golden key, but we get in further. And sometimes these newcomers in villages play a role because they bring new energy and knowledge, etc. But of course, they are discussed. If there are too many and they are not fitting in and accept the culture of the area, then there are clashes. But so 6 years ago, to answer your question, there were empty houses which the people could not sell, wanted to sell, but could not sell. And some of them were bought by entrepreneurs who put workers in it. Or drugs, where I say weed, you can also grow weed in the houses, etc., or in the stables, etc. So we had to look carefully at that. Now we see prices rising, and you have different problems. I see 2 questions in the chat about...
Yes. Sabrina Stieber, for example, thank you, Sabrina, for that question. It says, thank you for the interesting presentation about the circumstances in the Netherlands. I have a question about the possibility to keep students from abroad in Groningen after their studies. Do the students stay or do they leave the city?
First, we have a lot of students from abroad, about 25% at the Hanzehogeschool University and the other university. And it was also very promoted because, of course, we have lesser children, lesser youngsters. So we need more students from abroad. And also this poses, gives new initiatives. You hear all kinds of languages here in Groningen if you walk on the streets. But sometimes Dutch students say, hey, we can't talk Dutch anymore. And the lessons are in English most of the time. So many leave afterwards. The city of Groningen doesn't have population decline. That's a city. And here housing problems are almost as severe as in Amsterdam. It's sort of little Amsterdam here. So there's not really a policy of keeping all those foreign students here. Some stay, most of them leave afterwards. And then you have a question of the tiny houses, huh?
Yes, so she says also, Sabrina, in Germany, we're also talking about the implementation of special rights for tiny houses. How is this legally organized in the Netherlands?
There's much discussion about tiny houses. But they are seen as a flexible, temporary, maybe possibility. There's also a lot of interest from several people. We did, Elles Bulder had a project to see how much real interest there was. And there was interest from youngsters, but also of people, for example, who are divorced, who seek a new house, a small house. So there's certainly interest. When it comes to realizing, you need, of course, space, which is there, but there's also legal problems, as you say, because, well, you need infrastructure, electricity, sewage, etc., which makes those tiny houses a bit more expensive. So if you have an area where, for example, there was a factory or something else, then it's maybe easier to put them there. But are they real houses or not? Between the province and the municipalities, there's discussion. We had youngsters in a Frisian village with their parents who designed for 10 houses for 10 years, quite a good project. And the municipality was in favor, but the region, the province said, Well, the prognosis for houses are that in 10 years, the households will still go down. And why do we need these tiny houses? So also there is discussion, whereas I think that for 10 and 15 years, we still need more houses, and then afterwards, maybe less houses. So a temporary solution would be a very good idea at this moment.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Does anyone have any more questions? Antonio is telling me there are no questions in Facebook, I think.
Maybe then I can tell you something more about transitions.
No questions from Facebook.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. So Ellie is just going to conclude by telling us a few more things. Okay, then.
Yeah, the other transitions we have here, of course, is the energy transition. Those old houses, which were at low prices, we still have a lot of them. Some of them were taken out of the market. We have transformation. Some villages have taken quite a lot of houses out of the market in the last 10 years. City of Delfzijl, for example. But they are now building new houses because those old houses are really not fit for the demand of today and the energy demand of today. And if those prices of those houses are low, the owners won't invest. And also the housing companies don't want to invest because those houses are not worth much and it costs a lot of money. Sometimes the whole amount of the price of that house to make it energy level B or A, what we have here. And that is also a problem. They won't be sold because now energy prices are high. So if you see the houses may be cheap, but the energy bill is very high. So we have a serious transformation problem there. And so this demographic change has to go along with other transitions in our area. And climate change and energy is one of them.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's very interesting. And perhaps in some of our future seminars, we'll have time to talk about that aspect in more detail because it's very important.
Yeah, so we did a Krimp Cafe, a meeting on energy. And then some people said, what has this to do with population decline, energy? You can take any subject. But I think if you look from a demographic perspective to housing, in an area where prices are going up, it's much more interesting to invest in energy measures than in areas where prices are going down. So yes, this population decline has effects on a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, it's all extremely interesting. And I'd like to thank you very much for that very enlightening and thought-provoking talk, which shows us how things in Northern Europe take a maybe slightly different course from in the South, and maybe the problem is not as severe, but you have more solutions, which is interesting for us. I'd just like to say that this is the fourth of our seminars, and the fifth seminar is going to be on the 25th of May, again, a Wednesday at 12 o'clock, and it's going to be about young people in rural areas, the work of the Officina Giovani Aree Interne, which is by Giulia Sonsogno, who is from the Office of Young People in the Internal Areas in Italy. And so we're looking forward to that talk. I'd like to welcome you all to that in 2 weeks' time. Thank you for attending. Wait a minute. Sorry, there's one more question. One further question, which is, could I ask, please?
I'm trying to read it. My Spanish
No, don't worry. I will translate it. it. It says, what do you think about promoting entrepreneurship policies in rural areas to prevent them from being turned into simply residential areas? So what's your experience on that, promoting business and entrepreneurship in rural areas?
Well, first, this whole idea of population decline was that it was a housing and a social problem, but it's also a regional problem. And if you have to develop a region, you have to include economics as well. So we do that. We did also a meeting on entrepreneurship in shrinking areas. And people think there's nothing, but it's not true. There are a lot of interesting businesses and also innovative businesses, because sometimes, they have to work with limited workers. They are not fit, so they are inventing their own schooling programs. And but they have an advantage. They have, of course, space, so they can easily develop new entrepreneurial buildings, etc. And there are really very good businesses here. What we try to do is to connect those businesses. Very often you see that businesses in the same field are connected, are in an organization, but we see that it's more interesting to connect business from different sectors. Mm-hmm. So they can get crossovers in knowledge and working, but within a region, and this enforces regions. And our national government also sees now more options in regional deals than in sectoral programs. First it was a program on this, a program on that, and now they work together with a region to develop several things in an integrated way in a region. So this is quite new. This started 4 years ago, and a lot of municipalities are included, but also entrepreneurs. So mm-hmm. Education and entrepreneurs is very important. So
yes, because the second part of the question here is about whether it would make sense to build little schools, for example, which would make families stay in the area or even come to the area, and that would promote the idea of setting up also some businesses there. I'm not quite sure exactly whether these little schools are envisaged as a kind of business or...
No, we, of course, some residents want to keep their schools, but really if the school is very small, it's difficult to get the same quality, although social cohesion is very good. We see more in cooperation between education and entrepreneurs, so that if it's difficult to get to keep vocational training on all levels, for example, on cars or IT or whatever, then if you do your practice in the company can learn something, and the school doesn't have all those. Doesn't have to have all those equipment. There's new equipment, which is very expensive, but the companies maybe have it, and vice versa. Also, company members go in the evening to that school for extra training. So, not little schools, but cooperation we see as a.
Okay, so cooperation between schools and businesses. This is something I think that we haven't seen so much.
Yeah, there is a idea. Yeah, we have a building campus, so building companies, there are a lot of building companies here, comes from agriculture. People went in building business, and our companies work in the whole of the Netherlands, but so building campuses, tech campuses, where you have different levels of education, and including with startup of companies or other bigger companies, that is something which is for sparsely populated areas important. And new business model.
Yeah, new business model, certainly. And what we say also, there are some co-working centers in rural areas where people come together from different types of business and work together. And maybe it does create new synergies.
Yeah, I was lately at a health hub where small scale firms with and up to 10 workers, they could stay there in that building, and then they have to start their own business. But as long as they are small, you have a lot of interaction with students, and for students it's nice to be in a working environment.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Ellie, and that's really been a very interesting talk with some good questions at the end.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing everybody again in 2 weeks' time when we welcome Julia, who's from Italy, to talk about the young people's situation in Italy. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay, goodbye.